The old Blazer. We got to do a little do-dabbing on this thing, on this rear bumper and bumper end situation. These plastic pieces right here, this one's busted all up. These are called bumper ends. That's the part they call on this vehicle. This is a bumper end. They're made of plastic, and they bolt on with some studs that are fastened to the body. The rear bumper has rotted out. I've had duct tape with paint over top of the duct tape on there for last couple years. The bumper end on this side's actually all right. The one on the other side I backed into when I was out shooting deer rifles one time. I backed into an abandoned well casing and tore it up. But we got to do something about this finally, and I'm going to start out by making some new bumper ends out of 14 gauge steel. And the first part of it's going to be using the old bumper end to get the shape right and get the hole pattern figured out. And I've got an issue with the fender flares down around the bottom on this thing anyway, and my easiest solution is just to cut that part of the plastic fender flare off. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a cordless grinder and a cutting wheel, and right at the top of the bumper end, I'm just going to make a cut and cut this fender flare directly off, and some of the metal that's rotted away in that area, and the bracketry that has rotted away in that area. I'm just going to cut it off. And then I'm going to use the Cut 55 Arc Captain Plasma and cut this 14 gauge steel. And this will be what I'm going to make a bumper end out of. I'll kind of be making it a little, I'm going to initially be cutting the metal out a little bit bigger than what I need. And I'll just trim things down as I go and find out what I need. But the main thing here is using this side to make the pattern and the holes and the shape of it where it goes against the Blazer correct for both sides. And let me tell you, I've gotten into a few situations like this where I was making something for one side and I knew I was going to need one for the other side also. And anytime you're in that situation, my best advice for you is make them together. Don't completely finish the one side and then go back later when the one side is done and start fresh on the other side. You're going to lose the ability to use your part as a pattern in a lot of cases like that, and you're better off to do them together. All right, moving on with this bumper end section, what I decided to do, I've got the holes drilled in the plate, and I just held it up on the studs where it's going to bolt onto the Blazer, and I made a soapstone line around the body and the fender flare. So what I decided to do once I had that soapstone line in place is I just figured, this straight edge is 1 inch wide, and I lined it up on one side against the two soapstone marks that were furthest outward. And then I marked the other side of the straight edge. So in other words, I made a line 1 inch out from the furthest 2 points of soapstone. And now I've got my other one set up as a mirror image, and I'm just making the same line. This is what I was talking about. You want to mirror image your parts so that it's easier to build because you're building them together. You can see how, in this case, I've got both the parts in the brake at the same time. I don't have to worry about the angle being exactly any angle exactly as much as I need to worry about the two being bent exactly the same, and bending them the way I'm doing them here with both of them in the brake at the same time. I'm using my bevel square to give me an idea how much to bend it, but the amount is not as critical as them being the same. So that was a great way to do that. And then I'm going to stick it up here, and I'll just take a straight edge, and I'm going to look at it and say, well, I'd like to cut it off running kind of along the fender flare and down like this. And then once I've got that established, I can make a cut line on that one. And then I'm going to know where to bend this one and cut this one. And when I do that, I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other one. And then here we go again, doing the other bend to make this a channel. I'm going to bend them both together. And the one part that I'm not going to show you in this video is when I make bends that are this big in my brake, I got to take some of the fingers out to get the part out. But I got it out of there, and this is a few days later. I've stopped and started on this a lot because I've had other things to do for other people. But you can see here what I've done. I cut I cut the end plates and welded them on. So that gave me pretty much my caps. One cap being the rear and the other cap being up like the mud flap section where the tire's at. And got that welded up and tested. Gotta hit y'all up real quick with a t-shirt ad. Boss Lady Tina's selling these t-shirts. Got NBS welding on the chest, American flag on the sleeve, great big NBS welding on the back. Send Tina an email request, nbswelding@aol.com, $25 plus the cost of shipping. Thank you. All right, so I've had these bumper ends on the Blazer. I've been driving it a little bit for a few days. Don't hear any weird noises, no weird wind issues or problems like running high speed on the interstate, making funny noises. You never know about a body part till you try it. But I've had it on there for a few days, and I've run it, and so far so good. I feel like I can move on with the bumper. I've kind of been working on this in between other things. I know the video's probably going to be a little weird. I wanted to show you though actually what this factory bumper looked like. It really rotted out. So we're moving on, and replacing the bumper is the next step. So what I've done right here, I'm showing you, I've got some tubing clamped up there that I'm going to use as a guide so that my bumper tubes are an inch away from those bumper ends. And what I'm trying to show you there is the washers that I put between the bracket and the frame. That's going to make it so that when you put this bumper on and off the Blazer, it's not so hammer tight you got to beat it on there. Making a pattern where I want to bend a piece in the brake, and it's going to have some different stuff to it, different bends to it. And when it's one of these like this where you got a square piece essentially coming into an angled piece, that can be tough to get figured out exactly how you're gonna. It's easier to break it down and do the square piece and then do the angled piece individually. But then, like, I've done this pattern where I've made this piece right here. It comes over, it goes like that. It's going to go on and do something else. I don't know exactly what yet. But right here I put add 3/16 because this isn't big enough. I taped the two pieces I made, I taped them together. And the way I'm doing, you know, with these individually, it gets me going. It gets me in the spot. Now, you can't mess this up because even though this pattern's wrong, it's still a pattern to make a pattern. So now I'm going to be using a box that has a bend in it, and I can use it and make this pattern. And where I got the little goof where I need to add, I'll add to this. Make as many patterns as you need to, but if a pattern looks wrong, you can still use it. Don't give up on it. Make the notes on the pattern that you need to make it right, and just use the pattern to make another pattern. See what we come up with on this. I used this pattern to make this pattern. And I added this which makes this part. So my bend's got a put my bends in this, they would be, the part is like this. I put this up here. Fold it. So let's see if I wanted to bend that. That would be the wrong way. That would be backward. I want to bend that this like this. Now the other one, I want to bend okay, let's do it. Well, I got a mark. You saw me make those marks. It's the outer edge of the bumper. And what I want to do with the outer edge of this piece of 14 gauge metal is I want to make a hem. That starts with bending it as far as the brake will bend it. I think as far as it'll go is something like 135 degrees. I don't know. Now I'm going to make a line on here about an inch. And loving this Arc Captain 20 volt cordless grinder. I did a test in my last video of this grinder. There's a link in the description to take you to the Arc Captain site. You can get one of these grinders. They're interchangeable with the Makita batteries, but the Arc Captain 5-inch cordless grinder just beat the tar out of the 5-inch Makita. So here we're making the hem. Now I've got that cut down to an inch. I'll put it back in the brake, and you see when I smash that, it's making a strong, doubled over, rounded edge for the end of this part. And then the next thing, once I've put that up there and see what it looks like, is I've decided to cut this top 3x1 rectangular tube off at this angle like this, and then I'm getting it cleaned up, and I'm tacking in the part that I made. And I've got this nice hemmed edge at the end. I really like how this part fills in the end of the bumper. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cap off my 3x1 rectangular tubes. And I'm doing that with 1/2-inch rebar. And here on the bottom, I'm going to heat and bend the rebar so that it makes a cap, and it comes over and welds into the pad eyes that I welded on for pull hooks. And this also will make a place to put my foot to step if I want to get up to the upper roof rack of the Blazer. it would be a good bar to keep my foot from coming off of the end of the bumper. And it's also going to be looking like a gusset and looking like a brace, the way it's going to weld in. And then to cap that top tube that I cut off, I'm not going to heat and bend. I'm using the cutting wheel to cut the rebar and miter it. And I'll tack those two parts together as the cap, and then I'll slide them in and slide them in place on the 1x3 rectangular tube and weld that rebar in as a cap, just like that. Got busy in amongst several other things and was jumping back and forth between quoting jobs and working on the Blazer, and finally got this thing wrapped up. I had ideas about putting lights in it and different things, and I'm not going to do that. I've got to call it good. These plates I made with the hem on the end worked out real good. Capped the tubing with rebar, and I like that. Right here on the hitch, I went over the 2.5 by 2.5 with a 3x3 by 3/16 that just covers the pin. I added that in to like fill that in so it would be look like it was gusseted. Welded most of it up with the MIG, and on the MIG welding on a lot of this I was running that 023 wire that I got a deal on, and I seem to have feeding issues with 023, and it was actually 025, but I think the thing on that wire is just, it's such a small diameter. And it reminds me back when times before I was doing some work on body metal, and a guy loaned me a MIG welder that he had that run off 110 volt that had 023 or 025 wire in it, and the gun was like only 5 or 6 feet long. And I'm running this through a 10-foot gun. And that's kind of making me think that if you're running through a 10-foot gun, 030 is probably as small as you'd want to go. I did run the 025 successfully, but I'm just saying I had more occasions of it getting stuck in the contact tip. I had more occasions of dealing with feeding issues in general, and you always have feeding issues with MIG. It's quite a contraption, you know. It's not as simple as a stick machine, but I went to the 030, and like I say, I always say 030 is the perfect in-between, because you can go all the way up to 1/2-inch plate cranked up, running fast and hot, and it's fine, and you can weld body metal and mufflers with it, and it's fine. I just think 023 and 025 is too small, unless you've got one of them super short guns and a tiny little MIG and you're doing nothing but body work and super thin stuff. Now, the one thing I did stick weld here is the diamond plate top. I ran that with 5/32 jet rod. Another thing I did on this bumper, I welded it up with it bolted on there. And I hope you saw earlier how when I put my bumper brackets, when I put my bumper brackets back on the frame, I put some washers behind them so there'd be some space. Now, I didn't have to put those washers back in there when I installed the bumper. The brackets squished in just fine to the frame. But by having those there, it made it so when you went to put the bumper on, it wasn't so tight you had to beat it on there with a hammer, which is nice. You need a little space. I would say 95% of the welding that I did on the bumper, I did with it on the vehicle and the bolts tight. And I didn't get any warping that way.
Some of it was out of position that made it harder to weld. You know, if you'd taken it off and put it up on the table, it might have been easier, but you might have warped it and had trouble getting it back on there, or had something that was twisted up like a pretzel, and that would be undoubtedly undesirable. So another thing that I decided to do on this, notice I got the license plate. I've added a license plate light to the tailgate, and I put the license plate on the tailgate instead of having the license plate on the bumper like it originally was. Here's the thing with that. With a vehicle like the old Blazer, I'm towing a trailer, I'm backing around things, I'm doing stuff. I don't pay that. It's not like my truck that has a backup camera when I'm backing up to a trailer and I can line it up first time, first shot every time. And I will use the Blazer to hook up to a trailer, and I will back up to the trailer and bump it. Like, I'll bump the tongue of the trailer to get an idea of where the trailer's at. And sometimes if I bump the trailer with the bumper, I'm bumping it into the license plate and messing it up. The rest of this bumper, you could bash into your trailer and you're not going to hurt it. You might scratch the paint, but you ain't going to hurt it. Not like you tear up an aluminum license plate if you back into something. I'm just saying, I'd rather have the license plate up or out of the way. If I back into something, the reason to have a strong custom bumper is you don't worry about that shit. So that's kind of what's going on here with relocating the license plate. So, like I say, I'm calling it good for this for now. I had thought about adding lights on this great big flat area that just looks too big on the bumper end sections that I built. I thought about putting lights, maybe marker lights, you know, in the bumper. Just limited on how much time I'm going to put into it, and I'm calling it good for now. You can always come back and dick with that stuff later, and I'm probably not going to have time. So I want to thank y'all for watching. We'll do some more doozens on the Blazer as we go. I definitely got to deal with the front bumper. It's rusted out too. But I want to remind you, learn how to work with what you got. That way you always have everything you need.